Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for our first webinar of the series of webinars we have scheduled for this upcoming school year. Welcome, educators one and all, to NGSS in Action, meeting NGSS Standards year-round through outdoor learning. And for those who aren't familiar with the acronym NGSS, that stands for the Next Generation Science Standards. These are national standards for the United States. Many states have adopted them or have picked up the standards and modified them to an extent to meet their own needs. So what we're going to do tonight is we are focusing on our elementary roughly K through 5 educators who have the pressure to maybe meet some of these next generation science standards, but who may not have the background of science or who are interested in getting kids outside and engaged more with this outdoor learning concept. So for those of you who are new to our webinars, welcome. We use this platform called Zoom, and we try and make these webinars interactive as much as possible. So if you haven't already found the chat window, it's going to be maybe if you hover up on the top, or it'll be on the top left here, you'll see a button that says chat. Click on that. And what we like is to have everybody actually select everyone or to all participants. That way, anything that you comment, others can see, and it allows for a great discussion. Not only do we want you guys to enjoy the ideas that Kelly and myself are going to put out during this webinar, but we also want you to bounce ideas off of each other, and we found that that's been really works really well for a lot of educators to hear from other educators too. So we're going to test out this chat window. And if you can, let us know who you are, what type of educator you are, and where you are coming from in the world. Welcome, Phoebe. Connecticut. Oh, we are officially international. Devlin in Alberta. Michigan, a non-formal educator. Excellent. Informal. Medina, New York. How far away is Medina from Ithaca? I don't know. Kelly's Googling right now. Welcome, Gail, Georgia. It's always interesting to see how many, you guys are between Rochester and Buffalo. Okay, so you're probably about 2 hours or so from us. Welcome, Yale, welcome, Jane, Mary. Excellent. Yes, Phoebe, what you'll see is not everybody will comment when it says to send to all panelists and attendees. So for those of you guys who do wish to keep your comments or your name or whatever private, I understand. For those of you who don't really care, please go to that to button and select all panelists and attendees. Again, we want to try and have everybody bounce off ideas from each other. So let's get started for tonight's webinar. For those of you who are not familiar with us, we're the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. We are associated with Cornell University, and we're based in Ithaca, New York, as is Cornell University. But the lab itself is a nonprofit, membership-driven institution. And our mission is to interpret and conserve the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and citizen science, mainly focused on birds. You know, we do have other projects and programs such as the Elephant Listening Project, the largest natural sounds multimedia library known as Macaulay Library. We have a bioacoustics research program. There's a lot of different projects here at the lab, but we really focus on birds here. Now, specifically, we are part of the K-12 education group here at the lab. And our mission is to create innovative resources and training that build science skills while inspiring young people to connect to local habitats explore biodiversity, and engage in citizen science projects. I'm your presenter tonight. My name is Lindsay Glossner. I'm the Outreach Coordinator, and monitoring our chat window, she'll be chit-chatting with you guys, sharing some helpful links of what I'm discussing, is Kelly Schaefer, and she's our Education Specialist, aka Certified Bird Nerd. Feel free to send her any of your birdie questions and test her knowledge. See how awake she really is. Between the two of us, we really have, we have probably 9 years of experience here at Bird Sleuth, and we really are passionate about what we do. So we're happy to be with you guys tonight. Now, as far as the K-12 outreach here at the lab, we actually don't work directly with youth for the most part. Essentially, our work is divided up in 2 resources. One is developing curricula and educational resources. Now, this is both free resources and paid resources, but our other part is also around educator training. We have in-person trainings. Our biggest one is usually our summer educator retreat, where we have 50 educators across the country and some internationally come to the lab. But we also have online trainings like this one. So if you are interested in learning more about our programs and resources, feel free to attend other future webinars and so forth. But what we're going to talk about today is our webinars and meeting NGSS standards. Now, what is new about our webinars this coming school year is the fact that we are offering continuing education units. So if you are an educator, classroom teacher who needs, what's the word I'm looking for, credits to go through recertification, you can receive formal CEUs from Cornell University. I see a couple names on here who have already actually purchased CEUs. Thank you guys for joining us. If there's something that interests you, feel free to purchase those. It is $50 for a CEU credit. However, for those who have joined us in the past, you can still also get the informal completion letter. It's not an official Cornell University thing. It's just a quick little one contact hour official letter, and we'll talk about that at the end. So let's get underway. I was looking over the learning objectives for this webinar, and the very first learning objective I put on here when I drafted this, 3 months ago, was addressing for you as educators to understand why we should feed birds. So I want to open up the chat window to you guys and ask, why feed birds in the first place? Either if you feed birds right now, if you're interested in feeding birds, why would you do so? And let's get rid of that. Go away. Yeah, so many of these common answers here, you want to be able to bring them closer to you and learn to identify them. You love seeing their behavior up close, to take photos of them. Heather, I'm the same way. I'm an amateur photographer, and I'm just like, bring the birds close to me. I want to photograph you in the sunlight. Devlin, a lack of other food sources, absolutely, to help the environment. They're beautiful, and it makes us happy to see them. Mary, I love that. I don't often hear that response, the fact that birds eat pests. That's a really great point. You want to provide them food in the winter, their interaction with the schoolyard habitat and their environment. Wonderful answers, you guys. Maintain diversity, observe their behaviors and patterns. A lot of the stuff that you're addressing, you're talking about habitat, you're talking about ecosystem interactions, behaviors and patterns. These are some really great content that we can address with birds. The biggest answer that I often hear, if ever I ask people why to feed birds, is an image that some people may pop up here. If you're in the South, I know we saw a couple of Georgia folks, this may not look too familiar to you. One time I was in Georgia, there was a little bit of snow, but it was like maybe a quarter of an inch and everything shut down. But this is more common for us, say, in Alberta, New York, Michigan. Actually, this photo is in the UK. But what it is, providing a food source for wildlife in the winter time period. Birds are adapted to survive in the winter time period, so it's not necessary for us to do it, so to say, but it's definitely helpful, especially when you get into situations like this where you have several inches of snow and It just makes it a lot easier for birds. Another great reason that some of you guys have talked about is the fact that the birds, by feeding them, it's bringing the birds to you. And that opens up a wealth of opportunities. One, for us, Heather, amateur photographers, but also for us to start thinking about addressing content. And content is really big when it comes to feeding birds, because with us feeding birds, we can meet the next generation science standards with the kids that we work with. And that's ultimately our biggest goal. If you are somebody that has to meet the next generation science standards, there are some classrooms where you need to make sure that you've addressed exactly what disciplinary core idea or what performance expectation you're addressing. If you're in an educational setting where you don't have to be as specific, there's still advantageous means for meeting these educational standards. So what I'm going to do first during our webinar is just break down these standards real quickly, and then we're going to talk about some of the best practices for feeding birds and educational resources that marry the two concepts of feeding birds and studying wildlife while also meeting these educational standards. So let's dive into these next generation science standards. For those who aren't familiar with them, they're composed of three components, I guess I should say. The next generation science standards are composed of the science and engineering practices. So these are such things as asking questions, planning and carrying out investigations. These are practices that kids should be able to do. Then we're talking about cross-cutting concepts. So these are overall concepts that such as pattern, cause, and effect, and they span many different content areas or disciplinary core ideas, such as the life sciences, physical sciences, engineering, etc. So between these three components, we have developed, I say we like I did, the framework has developed this framework of how to best work with kids and develop their skills and understanding in the sciences. Now, if you have to address or have ever seen the next generation science standards, you may see something like this, which I know when I first saw it, I thought, no way, not doing it. So we're going to first break it down into something a little more comprehensive, easier to grasp. And let's just look at the basic outline first. And that's what this says. When you're looking at a standard for the next generation science standards, the very first and most important component is at the very top, and that's that performance expectation. A performance expectation is essentially what it's saying. It is the expectation of what that student should be able to perform. So we're looking at this as this is what we expect the student should be able to do. Now, under that, it has to meet those three components of the next generation science standards. It's going to tell you, based off of this performance, a student will be able to address these practices in this disciplinary core idea using these concepts. Now, what I really like as well is they've added a connections box at the bottom. And that connections box, if we go even further, will break down into how this performance expectation articulates across different grade bands, how it connects to other disciplinary core ideas or contents in the same grade level, and how it also connects to other standards such as the Common Core state standards. So when we break this down, we can see, okay, we have a clear performance expectation at the top, what the student needs to get. The reasoning behind that performance expectation is below in the practices, the DCI and the cross-cutting concepts. And then that connection box allows teachers to make that better connection towards other standards that they may have to meet. So when you bring this all together, though it still looks intimidating, we have an easier grasp of what we are looking at. At that top, this is for a performance expectation to construct an explanation that predicts patterns of interactions among organisms across multiple ecosystems. And all of these will have some form of clarification statement. And that clarification statement for this is it's emphasizing on predicting consistent patterns of interactions in different ecosystems in terms of relationships among and between organisms and abiotic components of an ecosystem. So within that statement itself, it's already talking about patterns, constructing an explanation, and it's focusing on the content such as ecosystems, so the life sciences. So right there, you're seeing some of the practices that are being called out, the content that it's addressing, and concepts that it's also talking about. And ultimately, you will say, this is how it's connecting to other middle school standards, this is how it's articulated among different grade bands, and this is how it connects to other standards such as ELA and mathematics. Now, when we look at the next generation science standards as a whole, if you're a state that's just now starting to adapt these, there are some conceptual shifts to take into consideration. First, the next generation science standards are performance expectations. They're not a curriculum. And that allows you as educators to have the freedom of choosing different activities and curriculum that you want to use that can address these standards. It focuses on the interconnected nature of science and this real world component of actually grasping and allowing kids to grasp the concept of real world problems. It's built up coherently from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. It's going to focus on that deeper understanding and application of content, less on the memorization component. And it's designed to prepare students for real life, whether it be college, career, citizenship. So what's really focused on this is the fact that they're supporting building the student as a person as a whole, not just having them succeed necessarily on a test. And what we really love about this is that very first point we're talking about, this is not a curriculum. These are performance expectation guidelines of what we want the kids to see. And so in doing that, you're able to utilize resources and activities from us at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology to support and meet these educational standards. So what we're going to focus on today is how these US K-5 educators can really address not only these educational standards, but also how you can do it in a fun and engaging and outdoor way by getting them outside, by connecting them to the local wildlife through birds. Now, this resource that we'll be focusing on this evening is called Feathered Friends. I want to throw a quick shout out, thank you to Pennington. They have been able to sponsor us to make this resource free and available to anyone. But on top of that, they also have these amazing window bird feeders that we can distribute to educators for free as well. We just ask that you guys cover the $6 shipping fee because only in the US, thank you, Kelly. Unfortunately, we can only ship this within the US just for shipping issues, and we can only ship it to school or organizational addresses. More details at the end on that. That's also in the webinar description. But essentially what it is Feathered Friends is going to be the main resource that we're talking about of how to blend the outdoor connection and these next generation science standards. So within the resource, I think this is on maybe the second page. This is laid out completely. Feathered Friends, as an educational resource, is designed of 10 months of activities. You'll see the months on the left here, and each month is going to be a different topic around birds, such as identification, habitat, behavior, flight, conservation, nesting, etc. And we've broken each of those months into 3 different types of activities between engagement, exploration, and inquiry. But also we've aligned all of the months to specific disciplinary core ideas and the next generation practice standards. So for those of you who are you want to check off the box that this meets NGSS standards, this is what you need. There are educators, however, who do need to meet specific performance expectations. And I want to show you real quick how to do that. You'll see, let's go to example, October. The theme is Who's That Up in the Sky? For context, that's focusing on identification of silhouettes of birds. And you'll see that one of the disciplinary core ideas that it's meeting is LS1A. So for us, we've provided the basic disciplinary core idea. But what you can do, fun fact about Zoom, we can do some live screen sharing. So here we're going. I just typed in NGSS LS1A. And the very first link that comes up is an NGSS link, LS1A structure and function. So we're going to look at this, and we'll see it's at the Next Generation Science Standards website in the Resource Center, and it breaks down exactly what LS1A is. And it's focusing on how do the structures of organisms enable life functions. Now, it will give you a very detailed description about all of this, and it will talk about how this progresses from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade. But for those of you who do have to meet specific disciplinary specific performance expectations, you can scroll down even further, and it will tell you the exact performance expectations associated with LS1A. So because Feathered Friends is a K-5 resource, when we've addressed this, we're addressing these two performance expectations here. And I just wanted to make that available to you guys so you know exactly how to reach to those performance expectations. Now, along with the disciplinary core ideas, there's a screenshot in case I couldn't live share. I also want to point out these practice standards. So these are both the science and engineering practice standards. This research is mostly going to focus on the science practices, and you'll see these numbers associated here. And those numbers are associated with the 8 science practices that are in NGSS. And the 8 ones are as follows here. It's all around asking questions, developing and using models, planning and carrying out investigations, analyzing and interpreting data, et cetera, et cetera. So if we go back to our October month, we're seeing that it's meeting 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8. So that means during this month, we are helping students meet the practices of asking questions, developing and using models, analyzing and interpreting data, using math and computational thinking, engaging in argument for evidence, and obtaining, evaluating, and communicating information. Wow, that's a lot. And it really is. Each month is a lot of activities. And what you'll see the structure of those is we will have some background information for you as educators. We'll provide some identification information. We'll provide some going further activities. But the heart of each month of activities is around 3 different components: an engage activity, an explore activity, and an inquire activity. And we do recommend you can pick and choose. These are all designed to be simple, half-an-hour activities, especially for informal educators. This is perfect for you to just pick and choose different activities. But if you are in a setting where you'd like to be a little more comprehensive, you have multiple periods or classes with students, you can go from the engage to the explore to the inquire activities and make it more comprehensive too. So now that we've kind of covered the basics of how the NGSS standards work, and that we've aligned our Feathered Friends resources to the Next Generation Science Standards, let's talk about the fun part of feeding birds. And the very first thing when I start off about talking about feeding birds is I always have at least one educator who is thinking, this is great, I love this, but my kids just don't notice the birds around me, or we just don't have birds in our area. And that's what we call bird blindness. And we really encourage both educators and students to just take a second look, because birds are everywhere. And that's the beauty of them, is the fact they are everywhere. Now, to start off with the birds, feeding birds is the best way to bring the birds to you. Several of you already talked about this in our beginning slide of why feed birds. Feeding them brings the birds to you. And with that, we can then start the process of taking off those bird blinders and allowing the youth to start recognizing that birds are also everywhere too, and that they can actually watch them and enjoy them. To make life easier, we talked about this. For those of you who are interested in the US, etc., you can receive and order a Pennington window bird feeder. And what I really love about this is the birds truly come right to you. It's hard to miss the birds when they're at your window. But if you don't have the opportunity, if you want to go further with that, one of our activities in Feather Friends is all about making a perch bird feeder. This is a very standard example where it's all about the soda bottle feeder. You take a liter soda bottle, clean that out, make a couple slits, add a few wooden spoons or dowels, and hang it from a tree, and right away you have a bird feeder. It's really interesting. I've also had educators ask me, does that really work? To give you an example, at our summer educator retreat this past summer, we challenged our educators to build their own bird feeders. Many of them far more rustic, I guess would be a nice word to say, than this Perch bird feeder, because we really didn't give them any soda bottles or spoons or easy supplies. We gave them a lot of, we called it random junk. And though the birds didn't come to the bird feeders the next day, after a week, birds were visiting their bird feeders made out of random junk. So making your own bird feeder is certainly a viable option and a really fun activity. And that's just another great way to attract the birds to you, but also meet some of the next generation science standards and some of those engineering practices as well. Now, what you'll notice with the bird feeders is that there are a diversity of types of bird feeders around, and different birds will prefer different feeders. For example, a hummingbird. Many of you probably know what a hummingbird looks like and know what a hummingbird feeder looks like. And you'll probably recognize, okay, if I have a hummingbird that I want to attract, I'm not going to put out this suet feeder here on the top to try and attract a hummingbird, because the hummingbirds won't eat this suet. They're not going to come here. Just like this downy woodpecker is probably not going to go to the hummingbird feeder in this bottom left. So the type of feeder you hang up will attract specific types of birds. If you're looking to attract a specific type of bird, make sure you get the feeder that they want. If you're like me and you had oh my gosh, that's hilarious, Phoebe. For those who didn't see, Phoebe had a downy try and get her hummingbird feeder. I wish you got a picture of that so I can prove. I have deer trying to get to my feeders and chipmunks lying to my feeders, but I get to have a downy trying to get to a hummingbird. But anyways, if you're trying to attract a diverse number of bird species, then what I'd recommend is going for a feeder like a platform feeder or this hopper feeder here, which has a larger platform, a larger base that allows more birds, seed-eating birds, to come to that feeder. And as you start to attract more birds, the next step naturally that kids and adults do is to try and identify what those birds are. So along those 10 months of activities, each month we have a bird of the month to help you identify common birds, both feeder birds and some birds that you may not find at a feeder but commonly will see, like an American crow, for example. So here, these are American goldfinches, common birds found throughout the northern part of the United States, and they are gorgeous birds to start off with, and you'll regularly see them visit feeders. What I love is that the birds of the month, they will sometimes also have fun facts with them found in each of the month. Actually, every single month has a cool or fun fact, which is nice. What I love for these American goldfinches is that they are strict vegetarians. So they will not eat insects even during the nesting season to feed their young. They only feed their young seed still. So bird feeders are really great for American goldfinches. Now, along with different birds preferring different types of feeders, you'll also have birds prefer different types of bird seed. It's a very common question that Kelly and I get asked of, oh, what type of bird seed should I put in my bird feeder? Again, it depends on what type of bird you want to attract. If you're looking for a specific bird, such as woodpeckers, I recommend using some kind of suet. But if you're going for just trying to get whatever you can get, or as many general birds as possible, black oil sunflower seed is probably your best bet with attracting a diversity of birds or wildlife in general. Again, I have chipmunks and squirrels eating my feeders. And that's just, we'll talk about that. But what I want to show you guys real quick is this interactive that one of our citizen science projects, FeederWatch, has. So I'm going to go to their website. Their website is feederwatch.org, and Kelly will share the link to this direct interactive, but I wanted to show you how to get there. In feederwatch.org, under their Learn tab, it has right here this Common Feeder Birds interactive. So I'm going to click on that. Once it's loaded, we're going to view the bird list. And you'll see a guide right here on the left-hand side. It will ask you your wintering region, the food type, and the feeder type. So for me, I am in the Northeast, and you'll already see automatically the birds on my right-hand side start to shift. And I also just put out what was the most recent feeder I put out? It was black oil sunflower seed, actually. I put a black oil sunflower seed feeder out, and it was a tube feeder, a large tube feeder. So based off of where I am located in the general Northeast, and the fact that I'm providing black oil sunflower seeds in a large tube feeder, here's a sample of birds that I might have visit my bird feeder. Now again, this is just the general Northeast. You'll see that it's showing northern Canada as well as the United States. So I know there are some birds here like boreal chickadee that I'm really not going to see. But there are other birds here that I know I'll definitely see, such as that American goldfinch, a black-capped chickadee. I'd love to see red-winged blackbird. I don't have the habitat for that right now, though. Tufted titmouse. Tufted titmouse was one of the first birds that came to that bird feeder. So that's a really great way for you or your kids to first look and see what birds are you likely going to see at your feeder. What I like about this too is I can click on this tufted titmouse. It will show me a nice picture. It will tell me where their regions are. It'll also tell me what type of food they like to eat and what feeders they may also visit. And if you wanted to go even further, you can go to the online field guide page they have at the bottom here, All About Birds, and it will show me even more information about these titmice, further photos, range maps of where you can find them, and so forth. So these are just opportunities to go further with not only relying on the identification of the birds in the feathered friends, but this will help you identify what birds you're likely to see too. Okay, now I've mentioned this a couple times. I'm just gonna throw this question out there. How many of you guys feed birds and have pesky critters like this one here who comes to visit your feeder? If I had a show of hands of the people who raised their hands of feeding birds, I'm guessing at least half the people say yes. Some people are actually raising their hands. Great, yeah, squirrels, chipmunks. I had no idea that I just bought a house, and I'm just now making a feeder garden in my backyard and put up bird feeders. I had I expect squirrels to climb that pole, but I had no idea chipmunks could climb that thick of a pole. They are impressive. But when they get up there, they just lie in my feeder and bask there as long as they possibly can, because I don't think they want to make that climb up again. But yes, looking at what people are saying, there's some form of pests. Raccoons are definitely a big one too. I've heard about those, but squirrels are going to be the most common ones that you have. And it's something where there are several different ways we can go about it. First and foremost, we can just go about it and accept it. I've learned, you know what? I'm just going to feed the squirrels. I'm accepting it, and that's what it is, because my squirrels aren't that fat, so I'm going to fatten them up a little. But there are other means for us to go about trying to reduce the squirrels, especially if you're paying out of pocket to support feeding birds at your educational site or your school. That can start to get expensive. So there's several strategies that you can go about doing. First is consider using a baffle or squirrel-proof feeder, or also keeping your feeders about 10 feet away from jumping platforms. Especially that 10 feet away from jumping platforms, I found to be actually very helpful. For me, I can't use it because I have a fence that surrounds it. But that can be very helpful. As far as the baffles or squirrel-proof feeders, take it with a grain of salt. Squirrels are very determined creatures. And so though you may be able to put a baffle there, if they still have some place to jump from the feeder, they'll find a way to get to your feeder. My mom has tried the slinky method, which I found to be very interesting and amusing. But again, squirrels are smart and they'll figure it out. One resource that I have used before that I would recommend is just checking out our bird notes. We published this a while back of what can you do about squirrels. There's several different resources available, but again, pests are smart and determined. What I've learned to do is, again, I'm still in my backyard just starting to feed them, so I'm going to put up a baffle and try and find a way to maneuver my fence. But ultimately, I'm going to feed the squirrels. I have a cracked corn squirrel feeder, basically, that is going to be low and easy for them to access in the hopes that they'll go to the cheap cracked corn and try and avoid my high-energy black oil sunflower seeds. So we'll see what happens. But if you have any tips or tricks that you found really work well that are humane and don't harm the squirrel, please let us know. Now, the one other tip that I found when I was in my other house, I will say, I had the window bird feeder up with my other bird feeders, and the squirrels never touched the window bird feeder. So that's something good. The other concern people have about the window bird feeder is the fact that they are concerned about window strikes. And that is a very real concern. In fact, so much of a concern, we had one of our partner schools in Toledo, Ohio, actually conduct a study around bird strikes hitting their window. So I want to show you a quick video that this middle school team created. Okay, so we're going to show you this video, and hopefully the volume's not too loud.
We have a huge property with big woods, and our school has many windows. Since we have so many windows, we get a lot of bird strikes. It's our responsibility to keep the birds safe around our windows.
To collect data, we went to different parts of the school that are close to the forest to search the ground around the windows to see if any birds had struck the windows. We found, in a little over a month, over 14 strikes. When we took the pictures, we would write down the date, the number of bird strike of that day, and how many pictures we took.
We're going to make a device that is going to help birds stay away from windows because they keep crashing into them. In order to get permission to do this, we need to talk to our principal, Mr. Babe, and the head of grounds, Mr. Anning. We are going to make a layout/blueprint to present to them that has pictures and windows of the where the bird strikes are most common. We are making this so we can show them the specific areas that the strikes are occurring and for a short-term solution, and then eventually a long-term solution.
Our ideas to help the birds from crashing into windows is that we will be moving feeders closer to windows so the birds don't have enough momentum to crash. Also, we need to watch for berry trees that have fermented berries, because lots of birds get drunk by eating fermented berries. We know that because one of our windows has fermented berries near it, and it has the most strikes that we have recorded.
Okay, then it shows some of their evidence of bird strikes, which I'll spare you of some of those images. But that last little comment by Yusuf around the two parts, one, the distance of the bird feeders as well as the drunk berries. Fermented berries and birds getting drunk, yes, that is, I think getting drunk is probably the wrong term, so to say, but in fact there is alcohol in those fermented berries and it does affect birds. Cedar waxwings always seem to be the most common bird that is discussed around because they love berries, but that is in fact true. But the other thing that Yusuf was talking about at the very end was the feeder distance. And he mentioned how they're actually going to bring the bird feeders closer to the window to help prevent the birds to gain enough momentum and hurt themselves when they hit the window. And this is based off of a study done by Clem et al. In 2004. And they focused on how far from your home should you place your bird feeder to prevent deadly window strikes. And what they determined is that the safest area is, in fact, the closest to the window. Now, this is because of the birds, not as they are flying to the feeder, but as they are flying away from the feeder. Birds are smart. Their mind is set on that feeder, so they're not going to have an issue getting to it at all. It's all about them leaving the bird feeder. And the further away the feeder is from a window, the longer distance they have to gain enough momentum and actually cause a deadly strike or a fatal strike. So with that, bird feeders tend to be the closest. Bird feeders tend to be the safest when they are closest to the window. You want to try and keep them in that 15-foot range or closer. And I love the fact that the kids did the research around this and took in the evidence of those. And that was the whole inquiry process that was wonderful. A side note about those kids, they actually submitted this a little over a year ago for a grant from us to find a solution for their window strikes. And they did their research and found a company, Kaleidoscape, to put, tape, reflective tape, thank you, Kelly, reflective tape on their windows to prevent window strikes. And so it's been very successful for them so far. Now, the other thing to consider when talking about the location of a bird feeder isn't just the distance from the window, but is to also consider such things as habitat. Now, this looks like a gorgeous setup with bird feeders. We have quite a few different tube feeders, two of which look like they have rodent-proof casing that you may have. Several suit feeders. It may look like a platform feeder and even a water dish here, but we don't have any birds on the scene. Now, why are there no birds here? Can anybody find a reason why? Yeah, Phoebe, this is basically the situation you were talking about at your school. You had a couple of hawks move into your neighborhood. Here we have a couple of falcons. They're clearly have a beautiful, American kestrel, which is a type of falcon, here. And then, what is this, Kelly? Looks like a sharp-shinned hawk, potentially down at the bottom. So predators are here. And this is not necessarily a safe situation, so to say, for our feeder birds. Now, if you do by chance have this happen, there's two different ways you can go about this. First, you may not even realize that you've had some raptors move into your neighborhood, I guess I could say, and you might actually have a really interesting classroom show when you're watching the feeder birds and lo and behold, a Cooper's hawk swoops in and tries to snag that goldfinch. That's a really cool teaching moment, and the kids will never forget that. However, depending on the age group, you may also not want to have the Cooper's hawk hanging around your bird feeder all the time. So if you do have a pesky raptor and want them to move on, just take your bird feeders down for a few days. They'll move on to a new hunting site, and then you can put your feeders back up. Now, another thing somebody talked about, Heather, in the comments, was there needs to be some brush or branches closer to the feeders. And you're talking about a really great habitat cover component here. And that's a great theme that we talk about for one whole month in Feathered Friends. What's in a habitat? And focusing on that, a healthy habitat provides the 4 essential components that all animals need to survive: the food, water, cover, and space. And so when we go through this habitat, we have a really great example that a 3rd grade class did for us. And these guys are based in New Jersey, and their teacher had gone to one of our workshops and went back to school, was really excited in August to start getting the kids to observe birds and share their birds, bird sightings to citizen science. And after a little bit of time, they realized that there are no birds coming to her bird feeder. You can see it's right next to the window, and the kids could easily view it, and they just still were not seeing any birds visit. So the kids asked the question, why are no birds visiting our feeders? And this sparked, informally actually, a year-long investigation that these third graders conducted. And it all started by just putting out some bird feeders and noticing that birds weren't even coming. So the kids started brainstorming some ideas. Could it be the type of feeder that they offered? Could it be the type of seed? Could it be a water source? And ultimately what they decided was that there's just not enough cover nearby. The birds don't feel safe. And so they went through and started thinking about, okay, let's first do some background research about what birds are currently in our area, but then also what are some of the raptors that they have in their area too. They went through this process of going through morning bird walks and discovering what they had, as well as making these life-size images of raptors in their area. Some raptors that could very well visit their bird feeders. Others, like it looks like a snowy owl there, not as likely. That would be a great sight to have a snowy owl visit a feeder. But still, going through that background research and really getting the kids outside. And then based off of their research and understanding what birds they have in their area, they drew a plan, a habitat map of what they would like that habitat to look like. Now, what I really love about this is they not only drew the habitat that they wanted to look like, but they also started labeling everything, such as a water source, a food source, cover sources. And they also thought about habitat and space, which space is a very abstract concept for many kids to grasp. But I love to think about space in a vertical context. One of our, I think it was a 4-H educator we worked with, talked about space in a vertical context, and it's stuck with me ever since, that not only do you want to think about low shrubs and bushes, but think about also some higher canopy opportunities as well, because not all birds will use the same vertical space. And so after going through this process, the kids, again, received a small amount of funds from us to conduct this whole habitat improvement project, where not only did they decide they wanted to improve the location where the feeders initially were, right outside their window, they also wanted to refurbish an old garden bed that had become overgrown in the middle. And this entire process, from initially watching the bird feeders in the fall to continuing observing the local birds throughout the fall into the winter, over that winter time period, making that planning. And then as soon as spring came, they went through this planting and refurbishing process, so that by the end of the school year, they had created their own habitat for birds. And they actually had birds now visiting their bird feeders and their bird habitat. And that's what it's all about. These kids made a basic observation. It started with just asking that question of why are there no birds visiting our bird feeder? And then they went through this whole project-based learning component, this whole investigative component of understanding what birds are in the area, how they can support birds, and then conducting their own habitat improvement project. And so that's a big thing that we talk about within these Feather Friends lessons through that engage, explore, and inquire activities. A final thing I want to talk about with these activities is all around becoming a citizen scientist. And this is the main focus for our February lesson with Be a Citizen Scientist. And for those who aren't familiar, citizen science is the idea that scientists can't be everywhere. So they need everyday people to help them collect observations. And through that, it's a partnership between these volunteers, whether it be adults, kids, and the scientists, to answer these real-world questions. Now, there are 2 citizen science projects that I would strongly recommend that we talk about within Feather Friends. The first one is really great for those who want to build up a cumulative project, who you have one event that the community, the kids, the family can take part in, especially if you are at a nature center or an informal educator. The Great Backyard Bird Count is a marvelous event to take part in. And I don't actually know if they've announced the dates yet for the 2019. You should probably check that. Kelly's going to look at it. But what I've seen for educators is that they've gone through the process of building up their bird identification skills, having kids watch birds, go on bird walks, and then on a Friday or Monday of that February weekend, they then participate in this one citizen science project to show the fact that they are able to identify birds and that they can contribute their observations to this international citizen science project. The other project that I'll mention real quick for the Great Backyard Bird Count, this is an international project, and it's completely free to participate in. The other project that I want to mention is Project FeederWatch. Now, these are the ones that had the online interactive around feeding birds, because FeederWatch is solely focused on just observing birds that come to your bird feeder. So unlike the Great Backyard Bird Count, which you can watch any bird at a bird feeder, in a backyard, in a nature center, on a trail, in a lake, whatever, FeederWatch is solely focused on birds that come to a bird feeder, which is really advantageous for educators because, again, the birds come to you. Now, FeederWatch, they have a protocol, and they do actually give you some more guidance around identifying birds. So with that, each season there's a $15, $18 fee depending if you're a lab member. But this is also one where it's within the United States and Canada. And for those of you who are in a classroom setting, many classroom teachers in the elementary school have really enjoyed the structure of FeederWatch because you do have to make 2 bird observations on 2 consecutive days. So for example, you do 1 bird count on Monday and 1 bird count on Tuesday every week. And that structure has been really great for some educators that we've worked with. So with that, those are 2 citizen science projects that we strongly recommend. But ultimately, these Feather Friends activities will provide you the structure and framework to do some of these own activities, but also encourage kids to go on their own and conduct their own feeder investigations. Like I said, the Feather Friends activities are already aligned to the Next Generation Science Standards, but you'll notice on some of those Inquire activities, they encourage you to conduct your own feeder investigations. And that might look something like this. This is Amy. She is this isn't Amy. This is Amy's fake cat. And Amy had wanted to test whether a fake cat would scare away birds at her bird feeder. And she wanted to ask this because she noticed that when her neighbor's cat came around, the neighbor's cat scared away birds at her bird feeder. So she asked this question and wanted to conduct it. And what she learned was that without the fake cat present, the birds ate 3.5 cups of seed. But when the fake cat was there, they only ate 1/2 cup of seed. And this is a very simple experiment that we love to do, and I think it's really great and inspirational for many elementary kids to do. We actually had a 1st grade boy who was very inspired by this. And this year he conducted his own investigation, and instead of putting a fake cat out, he wanted to assess whether whether birds can see the moods of different cats. So he had different cat pictures, some with angry cats, some with calm cats, and with no cats. And then he did a study to see how birds would react to the angry cat photo, to the calm cat photo, and to no cat photo, and see how that would influence the bird's feeding behaviors. So again, this type of aspect of feeding is a feeder experiment is very easy to do. Another classic one is sussing out Do birds prefer specific types of seed, or do they prefer specific types of feeder, etc.? But having kids conduct their own feeder experiment is a great way to have them share the knowledge that they've learned, but also meet those next generation science standards. Now, what I really love, going back to Amy's experiment, is that she didn't just say that the cat was a good guard based off of her evidence. She actually went even further for us, and she said the cat is a good guard, but I thought the birds would learn the cat was fake. And so she actually made a prediction that the cups of seed eaten over time would increase because the birds would learn that the cat was fake and in fact is not guarding the bird feeder. And this is, again, the type of scientific thinking that we are striving for, not only as our organization, but the next generation science standards are striving for. So with that, we have 5 minutes left. I wanted to just highlight again, for any of you who are interested, we have a total of 10 webinars this coming school year, and we do have the opportunity that if you'd like, you can purchase formal continuing education units from Cornell University. You also have the opportunity, if you don't need the formal CEUs, just to receive a letter of completion from us. So feel free to let us know if you'd like one of those. I'll take any questions now. I know Callie's been typing away, but if you do want, if you do need CEUs, or if you do want a just a single letter of completion, you can email us, birds@cornell.edu, right there on that screen. You can also get social with Kelly on social media. I'm pretty sure her spiel is, though it says it's social, it's very lonely. Is that it?
It's a little lonely, yeah.
It's a little lonely, yeah. So feel free to get social with us on social media, Twitter and Facebook. And with that, we'll be happy to take any questions you guys may have. Yes, I did indeed. Thank you very much, Heather. I completely forgot about that. Bird feeders. Okay, so here's what to do about the window bird feeders. Kelly will share the direct link on our website in the store link. Perfect. Yeah, she's gonna just go to the Feather Friends. I'll have to plug for her. So what it is we will have you guys order the bird feeder online. It's a free bird feeder. You just need to cover the $6 shipping fee. We're a nonprofit. We don't have the fees to cover sending hundreds of feeders around the country. To qualify for that, you need to be within the U.S. and you need to enter in a school or organization address. It cannot be a residential address. That just is something that we feasibly cannot do right at this moment for the bird feeders. So as long as you are at a school, organization, if you're a homeschool parent and you have a community church or a significant other who has an organization address, we just can't send it to a residential address. It just has to be to an organizational address. And Kelly's going to get that link to you momentarily. There it is. Thanks, Kelly. So there it is. And as well, you guys can always email us, birds@cornell.edu, if you by chance don't have the link or what have you. We did record this webinar, which reminds me I should stop the recording.